All statements and opinions expressed by guests of the Adult in the Room podcast are strictly their own and do not necessarily reflect the beliefs or opinions of the host, producers, or advertisers. All interviews are presented in their most complete possible form in the interests of free speech. No statements should be interpreted as financial, legal, or medical advice. Listener and viewer discretion are strongly advised.
It's the Adult in the Room podcast with Victoria Taft. That's me. Welcome to the Adult in the Room podcast with Victoria Taft. You know, if you've watched or listened to the podcast over the last couple of years, we've paid some attention here on the Adult in the Room podcast to how parents have fought back against the woke culture's sweeping changes in your kids' schools. We've spoken to Asra Nomani and Shana Yashar about their local schools abandoning meritocracy in Virginia, kids working hard to get ahead, to get good grades, only to have the school district disregard all this hard work in the name of equity and hurt feelings, because we can't have hurt feelings. Now, the left is trying to extinguish competition, and I'll tell you why. Because that is the mother's milk of capitalism. And they hate it because commies don't like capitalism because it squeezes them out, provides it and requires them actually to compete. And the reason I say that is because I learned that very thing from just watching the left and getting a firsthand lesson about it on a show on homeless that we've done recently on the Adult in the Room podcast, in which our guest said, no, it's all about capitalism, if you can believe it. What? It's all about the system of government. So competition is the expression of the internal spirit to get better. And the left wants to kill that spirit in the name of equity because they are so wedded to the soft bigotry of low expectations that they don't care if they leave huge swaths of kids left behind. Now, okay, I said soft bigotry, but I meant straight up bigotry. And I wouldn't be so harsh if it weren't true and on brand. You know, schools have become an expression of the far left's political ideology at your child's and all of it, at education's expense. Indeed, only the future of our country depends on having sharp, inquisitive, engaged kids to be ready to take on the mantle of American exceptionalism. What is that? It's expressed by the rule of law, the love of country, equal rights, the ownership society that regular Americans used to be able to attain with a little hard work and ambition. Concentrating on the main things, the fundamental things, are anathema to the left because that connotes an objective truth and order. They want chaos. But they've come for your kids' schools, that mob of Jacobins, those chaos actors, because they hate what Americans have always striven to be. The schools have been turned over to the teachers' unions, and if you doubt me, look back to COVID. Randy Weingartner of the American Federation of Teachers or the people at the NEA had more say in your school's response to COVID than you did. And through it all, weaponized COVID misinformation and disinformation that we're only learning about now occurred, while at the same time telling skeptical parents they were the ones who were the dis and misinformers. So besides ending all the government unions which have overseen the demise of the excellence of schools, and go look at the numbers if you doubt me, there have been other ways that parents have fought back. Ian Pryor has been in the middle of the battle. With Asra Ashana, he's also sort of struck out on his own, become a tactician, and the parents fight against the left's machine. He's basically a field general, and he wrote a book about it, and he's telling you how to get it done. Parents of the World Unite, how to save our schools from the left's radical agenda. Ian Pryor, welcome to the Adult in the Room podcast. How are you?
Great. Thanks for having me on the show.
Well, how did I summarize it? Is that pretty much what the battle is?
Yeah, I think so. And I think really it is a battle. And you are dealing with people that, they're putting agendas over things like the rule of law, over things like the constitutional system, checks and balances, the idea of citizen representation. And in their mindset, these bureaucrats, these educrats, And these school board members that really rubber stamp this, they're smarter than you. They know more than you. So you just have to listen to them as they guide your kids to the future that they decide for them. And if you push back on that, well, you're going to have to suffer a consequence. And that's really sort of the story of Loudoun County, Virginia, but not just Loudoun County, Virginia. I think parents are seeing it really everywhere as they stand up and push back. And look, these are not, people that normally may have gone into a voting booth and just voted Republican, right? I mean, yeah, there's a lot of those, but they're people that really have been awoken for the first time to what's going on with their children's education. And they've really become single issue voters here. And so in Loudoun County, we had a series of events over the course of, really going on 2 years now that just show how these bureaucrats and how these woke elected officials, continue to implement their agenda over the basic things that the schools require, parents require in their schools, which is school safety, performance, achievement, and academics.
It's kind of basic, but they take their eyes off the main thing because it connotes objective truth. And they want objective truth to be extinct, and they want truth to be on a sliding scale, and they want to be in charge of the scale. So how do you reel it back?
Well, it's, that's the thing. I think people need to understand, while this is something that really parents got under the hood of the car during COVID when they're sitting at home next to their kids who are on their Chromebooks, it's not something that just happened overnight. This has really been going on for decades. You can go back to the formation of the Department of Education, where you really create a power center. And when you create that power center, it's going to attract special interests. And they're going to use that centralized power to really, force local entities to comply. And in order, if you want the federal money that's going to come along with this, there are going to be conditions. And it's taken a long time to really get to this point, but that's where we are now. So it's something that it's not going to be solved in 3 years or 5 years, maybe even 10 years, but it's going to require a sustained push. And, one of the things that we learned in Virginia in 2021 was that education in and of itself, when you poll people on issues that are important to them in an election, if people aren't talking about the education issue, it's maybe 5, 6 on the list. But once you start talking about it, especially as we did in Virginia, by the time the election came around, it was the number one issue going into the weekend before the election. So that's why it's so important. You've got to keep pushing.
I like your steps and how to do that, how to accomplish that. Glenn Youngkin is governor because of you guys. That's it. That's it. That's the story. And thank God for that. You liken your book to Sun Tzu's Art of War. Explain that a little bit.
Well, I think that there's a lot of issues out there that parents are pushing back on, and they have been for years. They'll go to school board meetings, they'll talk about a specific issue, and there's ebbs and flows in that process. But when you're taking on, as we were, a $1.6 billion organization, you really need to think strategically, you really need to think tactically, and you need to operationalize, or, it's going to fade out. And so, we really decided early on that, we needed to take it to the school board, and we needed to use everything at our disposal, whether it's communication channels, whether it's legal means, whether it's grassroots, and energize a community. It's not enough for, 200 people to show up at a school board meeting and protest something. Those 200 people have to build and build and build more people. They're at least aware of what is going on. And that can't be done with just one tactic. It takes multiple tactics to really start to make change. And, ironically, the key inflection point in Loudoun County, if the parents helped Glenn Youngkin get elected, but it was the activists and the school board itself that really activated those parents to get involved by, going so far beyond the bounds of civilized society that parents just said enough. And we thought long and hard about our approach, and certainly we didn't design everything from the get-go and say, this is every step we're going to take and this is going to be the result. But we were very flexible in our approach to understand that there was a lot at play here.
what came first for you, America First Legal, or was it this issue? And how did you keep politics out of it?
I joined America First Legal last February, really as a result of my experiences in Loudoun County and in the fight. And one of the things that we realized was the power of legal action to vindicate people's rights. The first real moment of that was in May of 2021, when a teacher by the name of Tanner Cross, who was an elementary school physical education teacher, he was put on suspension merely for going to speak at a school board meeting about a proposed policy that would, force people to refer to kids by their preferred pronouns, and if they didn't, they could be disciplined. So he went in there and said, look, based on my religious beliefs, this is not something that I'm comfortable with, and he got suspended. And that was a big inflection point in what happened in Loudoun County, because it further built this coalition. And what happened, he eventually, very shortly thereafter, went to court, got an injunction, he was reinstated, then went to the Virginia Supreme Court when they challenged it, and he won again there. And that was a big victory that I think gave parents motivation that, hey, your rights still count. And so that's one of the reasons why I thought America First Legal was just such a great organization, because we're able to go out there and talk to parents and say, look, we're a public interest organization. If you're dealing with these issues in your school and your constitutional rights or your children's constitutional rights are being violated, we want to help you.
The issues seem to transcend mere politics. People will say, oh, you must be far right, or you're crazy, or whatever. But, when a kid's raped in a bathroom by a trans kid, and that's not the first time that happened by that same person, that's not politics. That's just what's right and what's wrong. How did that go for you?
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I mean, the first inflection point, I think I told you the second inflection point, but the first inflection point was when you had a private Facebook group in March of 2021 called the Anti-Racist Parents of Loudoun County. And they created an enemies list, essentially, of parents to target who were, a group of parents, right? It was some parents that were protesting, critical race theory in the teacher trainings or infused in the curriculum, and other parents that were pushing to open schools. And within those groups, you didn't just have a monotonous group of individuals that were all conservative, right? I mean, you had independents, you had Democrats, you had lots of people who, saw that as, look, this is dangerous behavior when you're attacking the messenger as opposed to debating the message. And that really, I think, brought people of all stripes to the fight. When they suspended Tanner Cross, interestingly, you would have people come to the school board meetings afterwards and say, look, I don't agree with what he said, but I agree with his right to say it. And so, and now we're dealing with a situation where the school wants to, create unisex bathrooms, right? So that there's no longer sex segregated bathrooms, just sex bathrooms. It's going to be an $11 million pilot program. At the same time, they're cutting special education money. So now you've just activated the parents that are concerned with special education, who again are not necessarily part of one, political affiliation. That's what they don't realize. The problem is that they are so focused on politics. They're so focused on political affiliation and who you vote for that they can't understand that their actions have repercussions that don't necessarily track along partisan lines.
You've made so much impact, not just obviously in Virginia, but across the country. There are outposts of sanity in the West Coast. There, for example, in Oregon, something's happening to the extent that the new governor there has made it her mission to arrogate all control for curricula and all the attendant things that come with critical race theory and whatever happens to be in the news or the fad of the moment to the state. She's arrogating it all to the state. That's what she wants. There's a bill. I don't think it's passed yet, and I don't think she's signed it. But that is how much impact this group of people who started out in Virginia have made an impact across the country.
Yeah, and that's certainly an unfortunate development if that happens. But on the flip side, you're seeing states all over the place passing school choice legislation, which, school choice is not a cure-all, but what it does is it creates competition. And it allows parents who feel trapped in the public school system to have somewhere else they can go. It also creates competition between states. So, I mean, if you live in, Virginia, say, and North Carolina has school choice and Virginia doesn't, well, you might consider moving over the border and say, well, I can work from home. And, now that's a cost I don't have to pay to send my kids to private school or to homeschool or whatever the case may be. So it's going to create sort of this snowball effect. And I think we're starting to see this really across the country.
Yeah, it's true. But you've got some things that you tell people to do. You have like a to-do list of things that people can do. And it sounds like you said art of war. It's get in there and fight back. And every neighborhood is a battlefield.
Yeah. And the chapters are sort of divided up into kind of strategies or rules or lessons. And it's true. I mean, every neighborhood is a battlefield. And I heard some people out here in Loudoun County that don't like me very much say that he wants to turn every neighborhood into a battlefield. Like, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying, it already is. And it's not a battlefield where you're going to go out with, guns and pitchforks, hopefully. But what it is a battlefield of ideas. And there are people in your communities, in your neighborhoods, and they don't want you to believe what you believe, right? They don't want you to raise your children according to the way that you see fit. They don't want you to speak the opinions that you have. They want you to believe what they believe. They want you to raise your children the way they want you to, and they want you to speak the opinions that they have. And if you don't, right, well, then they will take action against you. And that is not the way. I mean, I always believe that the marketplace of ideas is how we progress. If you want progress, engage in the marketplace of ideas. If you think you have a better argument than me on something or a better argument on someone than something, then make your points. Make your points, use your First Amendment rights, go out there, write op-eds about why you disagree with this, go point by point, do that. That is the way of, the American experiment. But what we're seeing here is that people, they don't care if, you were at a cookout with them, 5 months ago. They're going to come after you if you don't believe what they believe.
It is true. A total domination of all institutions and all mindset is a must for them because they can't win in the arena of ideas. Joe Biden recently said, and I want to get your take on what your reaction was when you heard this, that all the children are ours. They're not the parents. What the actual frickin' A, man?
Well, that's straight out of, Karl Marx. That's straight out of Vladimir Lenin. Let's separate the child from the mother as soon as they're physically able, because they want to build ideologues. They want to have uniformity of thought, and then they want to be able to control that thought. So once everybody is conditioned to believe the same thing, that gives the people in power more power, because they now have an army of people that all think the same way. That there should be diversity of thought. Not necessarily everybody should believe the same thing. I have my ideas. I don't necessarily think that everybody needs to adopt the ideas I have. I respect the rights of people to disagree. And that's the problem that we're having in this society. And unfortunately, we're seeing it bleed into schools where, you don't have the right to disagree, whether it's based on, religion, whether it's based on science, whether it's based on common sense. You don't have the right to disagree. If you disagree, you'll be shut down, you'll be disciplined, and you'll be made into a pariah.
This is an interesting area. It's a unique area. This is the DMV, they call it. And it's the immediate area around Washington, D.C. This is the area where parents are bureaucrats or they're thought leaders. They are people who make decisions, and their decisions impact your life. These are some of the parents then that go to these meetings and say, oh, hell no, we disagree, and or push back on people like you because they don't want you to speak. This is the interesting thing about it. As you continued your battle there in this very unique area of the country, what were some of your takeaways? I mean, you might have the FBI assistant director's kids going to the schools in your area, and you've got other people who, generally speaking, would not agree with you. How has that been to navigate that?
Well, I mean, it's been interesting, and one of the things that certainly I've always tried to do, and the people that are like in our circle that really organized what we were doing was to play by the rules. The other side doesn't necessarily play by the rules, and maybe they have the local refs looking out for them. So you got to be extra clean. And you need to make sure that, when you're talking about public officials or you're talking about individuals, you're talking about what they say and do in their role as public officials, or what people say and do when they're out there speaking on the public square. And even when you get attacked personally, it's important to, if you have to get attacked personally, you take that up legally, but you don't get in the mud with people. I was like the be like Mike idea, which, I think about Michael Jordan, in the late 80s and 90s. And he had to go through hell when he was playing the Detroit Pistons or when he was playing the New York Knicks. I mean, they would foul him, technical fouls, just really dirty plays. And he didn't fight back. But what he did do is he got stronger, got a smile on his face, stuck out his tongue, scored, 35 points a game and on his way to 6 NBA titles. And that's the way to go, is be like Mike. Don't let them get you into the mud. Keep your eyes on the prize and focus.
My favorite baseball player, Tony Gwynn, my favorite baseball player of all time, because he was a good man as well as an excellent craftsman in baseball, would talk about all the batteries, like, not double A's, I'm talking D's and C's, big ones, they'd throw at him as he was in right field at Wrigley Field, and how he would just respond by stroking that ball because he had the best batting average of anybody, for many years. Wonderful hitter, just getting the hitting champ. And, it's the same thing, like be like Mike. And I just admired him so much. A lot of adversity for him. And especially when people are throwing projectiles at you, and people are throwing projectiles at you too. And they're not above doing that, by the way, literally, physically assaulting people. We've seen it over and over and over in the Northwest, in the California, West Coast, Antifa. You've got people who have been very willing, thank you very much, to destroy institutions, literally set them on fire, as in Portland and Seattle, and the same thing in LA and San Francisco. This is not nothing. You have taken on quite a bit to be as outspoken as you are. Have you ever been threatened personally?
Have I ever been threatened personally? I don't, not that I'm aware of. I have had people send mailers to everyone in my neighborhood but me, calling me a racist. So that was fun. This is the parents of my kids' friends. I've had things sent to my house. I've had people personally attack me online. I've had, a lot of suspicious things that I couldn't necessarily, prove. But definitely when you step out and the higher you get in sort of the profile of stepping out, the more risk you take on. And it's unfortunate because, look, I'm willing to meet with anybody, right? Provided that, there's ground rules, right? I mean, if you're going to lie about me out in public, or you're going to attack me personally out in public, well, I'm not going to meet with you. But if we have a disagreement on policy issues, hey, I'd love nothing more than to sit down with you and see, are there places where there's some degree of agreement, or let me understand your side better. You can understand my side better. Some people are willing to do that on the other side. Unfortunately, the ones that aren't are the ones that really have the most control and are the most aggressive, and use these tactics to harass and intimidate people, which is ironic because the Attorney General of the United States was talking about harassment and intimidation at school board meetings, but nothing about the people that speak at school board meetings or speak out against policies who are harassed and intimidated.
Well, that's true. What did you respond? How did you respond to the person who sent around these packets of materials calling you a racist? What did you do? Did you fight back legally, or how did that work out?
I reported it to law enforcement. I tweeted it out with some laughing emojis and just kept on moving. That's it. The minute you start engaging with these people, whether it's on social media or in any other forum, they've won basically. So, we just kept our eyes on the prize and focused. And that's, one of the chapters of my book is like, find the right bad guys, and I use it it quotes in bad guys. Yeah, I'm not saying that they're bad people. I'm saying that they're bad elected officials. And you're not going to go and get in this neighborhood to neighborhood or community to community fight with other people, that's toxic, and it accomplishes nothing. Now taking it to the elected officials, well, that's your constitutional right. That's your First Amendment right to petition the government for redress of grievances. And we always tried to be as humorous as we could about it, not, too humorous, but some levity. Play within the rules, make sure that you're, again, focusing on what they're doing and saying as either candidates or elected officials, but highlight that and investigate. Go in there and, one of the other things, and I don't know if I put this in the book, and perhaps I should have, but that always struck my mind was the movie The Untouchables, and how, they didn't get Al Capone on bootlegging, they didn't get him on murder, they got him on tax evasion. And that's what I see with a lot of these school systems, is that they don't have the support of the majority in a lot of these places for a lot of these, insane policies that they're trying to, foist on people. So they've got to cut corners, right? They've got to lie. They've got to hide things. They have to do all that. And that is something that I think most sane people across the political spectrum say, well, I don't like the lying. I don't like the hiding. I don't like the covering things up. And that's how, really an effective strategy is. You're not going to be able to play whack-a-mole with all these different things, but find that connective tissue, which is if you have elected officials and publicly, funded organizations that are blatantly lying to their representatives, that's a real problem, and people are going to have an issue with it.
That's a foundational principle. Telling the truth is foundational. It's a first principle. And when they're not doing it, they're doing something wrong, and they're probably doing other things wrong as well. And you guys got one of the school board members, as I recall, I believe that's who it was. It was the assistant superintendent, where he lied and got, he basically lied about not knowing about the rapist. And then what happens? He knows about this and allows a man to be dragged out by the cops. And that man, the father of the rape victim. My God. Yeah.
So that was our former superintendent and our now indicted superintendent. We also have our current on leave spokesperson who's on trial for perjury for allegedly lying to a grand jury. And that all stems from the same incident. But, and I'll explain that too. But, one of the things that I would say is that the school board and the school system, they have, like I talked about these inflection points, and things could have been very different, right? I mean, when you had that private Facebook group that 6 school board members were in, if they had all come out and say, look, we denounce this is atrocious behavior, we're removing ourselves from this group. Well, we wouldn't have tried to remove those school board members, and we wouldn't have ever galvanized volunteers and gotten media from it, right? And, maybe Terry McAuliffe as governor. If they didn't put Tanner Cross on leave, maybe we don't get another surge in momentum that carries us through that summer and puts all these people at school board meetings. And if 250 people didn't sign up to speak at a school board meeting where the arrest of the father happened, maybe that cover-up is never uncovered. But it was, because they kept making mistakes based on their own political agenda, and they still haven't learned the lesson. And the lesson is very simple. Represent your constituency, not your political party, not some special interest that's donating your campaign. No, represent your community, especially at a school board level, for crying out loud. I mean, we're not talking about, $10, $20, $30, $60 million Senate races. We're talking about, at best, $50,000 for a school board race. Is it that important that you appease your donors, or that you appease your political party while you're serving on a school board? Well, I guess for them, the answer still seems to be yes, but, we'll see going forward.
I see that I think it's a Maryland school district. I listen a lot to East Coast radio, and because I'm a radio guy. And one of the districts is now considering reducing the amount of time that parents have to speak, because they can't abide their opinions. And I just think that's very interesting. And they say it out loud, and they say it like they have every right to do that. I suppose they have all of their rules that they can abide by, but they don't say why. It's just that parents have exceeded their time limits. Really?
Well, the excuse is usually that, well, we only make, $20,000 a year to do this. It takes up so much time. These school board meetings run till well after midnight. So we need to cut public comment, right? Okay, well, here's something you can cut. All the proclamations that you vote on. These school boards, it's like, this month is going to be, driving under the speed limit proclamation month. This is going to be LGBT proclamation month 3, because we already have 2. And like, oh, but because we want to make everybody feel included. Like, nobody cares about proclamation months. No kid that I, certainly I went to school. I don't think we ever had a proclamation month. I don't think anybody, lost sleep over that and went home crying to mommy and daddy saying, we don't have a proclamation month for people that, that like Transformers are more than GoBots. I mean, it's just absurd. And they spend so much time on this. It's like, why don't you cut the fat from what you're actually doing in your official duties and not cut what is, constitutional rights to go speak at a school board meeting?
I especially thought it was rich that one of the school board members, I think I saw this on your Twitter timeline, where one of the school board members says, well, we're just doing our jobs. We're going to fund those bathrooms, the single sex bathrooms. And that's what we're going to do, irrespective of the fact that they have to cut special education to do it. Well, don't blame me. I'm just the guy making the decisions. It was, one of your tenets is make your fight must see TV. That must be one of the objects that you came up with, because that guy looks like he's wholly without.
Well, we back in the day, they would actually have the cameras on the speakers' faces, which really allowed, the people to go in there and give dynamic speeches. And the speeches that were really dynamic ended up getting a lot of play on social media, getting play on television, turned into everyday parents going on TV as guests talking about what's going on. But then they turned the cameras to them, right? And now it's the school board. It's all on the school board. So, okay, that's great, because everything you say and do, especially the stupid things, is going to make a different kind of must-see TV. So you really can't win with your little games when you do it that way.
You talk about when they mobilize, go guerrilla, and also flip the script for parents, suggestions. So how do they do that and stay within the bounds of rules?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think that, flip the script. It's when its enemies list came out, they were talking about how they wanted to infiltrate parent groups. They wanted to publicly expose them. They got infiltrated and they got publicly exposed. The difference being that, they want to infiltrate parent groups to publicly expose them for, personal issues, right? Whereas they got infiltrated and exposed for doing that, for doing something that goes beyond the bounds of civilized society that you wouldn't expect people in your community to be doing to each other, right? So that's how you do it with the rule of law, is you flip the script, but you always maintain that, look, we're going to do this and we're going to do it according to the rule of law and according to things that are a matter of public concern, not things that, you're bent out of shape because you don't like your neighbor because they disagree with you on something. As far as, when they mobilize, go guerrilla, that takes us back to that meeting where the dad was arrested. At that point, we had sort of had a run of show on television, on earned media. But at that moment, there was a very big opportunity for them to change the narrative, to flip the script on us, right? And say, oh, look what we have here. We have these insurrectionist parents. And, okay, we recognize the trap that they were setting. They wanted to play in the air. They wanted to play the narrative. So we were just going to ignore it. There were no school board meetings for 2 months. We're just going to hit the ground. We're going to go out and gather the signatures we needed for our removal campaigns. We're going to go out, talk to people, go to parades, do everything on the ground that, a political candidate might do. But instead, we were just parents really trying to bring attention to it. And we already had the benefit of everybody knowing what we were doing because we had had so much coverage in the media.
Well, and that backfired on them. The arrest of the dad totally backfired on him. I mean, that was just amazing. You talk about flip the script. Holy crap. That was in real time flipping the script. How dare you sick guy with a gun on a man who is just trying to get some answers about his kid. And it turns out they were lying about it the whole time.
Well, I mean, that's when we knew, there was a week in September, October, maybe a 2-week period where we knew things were going to undergo some big changes. And it started with the Terry McAuliffe, Glenn Youngkin debate where McAuliffe says, I don't think parents should be telling schools what to teach. We're like, well, wow, that's a campaign ad right there. Then you get the NSBA memo that, quickly flipped into Merrick Garland saying, yeah, we're going to utilize the Patriot Act to authorize the FBI and U.S. attorneys to investigate parents. And that obviously motivated parents. And then, locally, we had our success in court in one of our removal cases that we thought, we're probably going to win this. Ultimately, the school board member stepped down. But those three moments really sort of started to build the momentum. And then, and then at that point, that was when the story came out about the second sexual assault and the cover up. And it was just, that really changed the course of history.
So do you believe, you talked about the fact that the DOJ was going after some of these parents and this fake, Biden produced letter basically to the School Boards Association and all that stuff. Do you ever feel like you were being spied on?
I did a Privacy Act request. I never got anything from them. But I think there were a lot of parents that were concerned, and we later found out that they did investigate parents through, a whistleblower went to Jim Jordan's committee, and they tagged parents and they investigated parents, and, they didn't prosecute anyone because they didn't have anything. But it was very concerning, especially in Loudoun County, where, we have a Soros-backed prosecutor who, would love nothing more than to go off after those painful parents that, are going after her political allies. So there always is a bit of a concern with that. Fortunately, we have a law and order sheriff, and now we have, a Governor Youngkin and Attorney General Miyares who, look, we wouldn't have had them if it hadn't been for these radical activists, right? If it hadn't been for these radical activists pushing parents to the brink to actually stand up and say, look, I'm going to punch through all this. I'm not going to worry about what people call me and what people say about me. This is a fight worth taking. And so we did that, and then, Glenn Youngkin appoints Jason Miyares authorizes Jason Miyares to investigate Loudoun County Public Schools. And now the superintendent, who was implementing all the stuff that they liked, is facing criminal charges in trial in August and September.
Yeah, that's what happens when you lie to a grand jury, man. Sucks to be you, kind of a thing. What is your background? How did you get involved in all of this? Because you sound like you know what you're talking about.
Yeah, I was a lawyer in New England for the, first 10 years of my career. I wasn't like super political at all. I wouldn't even consider myself a Republican then. I think I voted both ways like many times. And then I ended up getting on a campaign to somebody that was a friend of a cousin of mine in Rhode Island who was the former head of the state police there, running as a Republican. He was a great person, great to work with. He didn't end up winning, but I ended up going down to Washington, D.C., where I started working in politics, worked at the NRCC, American Crossroads, and then ultimately went to the Department of Justice in a communications role. So I've had a lot of different things between legal, political, and communications that really fit the mold of what, I think somebody needed, at least in a leadership role in this fight in Loudoun County, where you could kind of look and see most of the traps. I mean, you don't see all of them because sometimes you don't expect your fellow community members to be as malicious as they are. But generally, it was something where we were able to operate in an efficient manner, knowing that we had communication channels, we had to understand the politics of things, and we had to understand the legal nature of things.
Were you out at the DOJ when Merrick Garland came in, or what?
No, I was there 2017 and 2018 at the beginning of the Trump administration.
Oh, okay. All right. So was that a political appointment or just? Okay. Yeah. Well, good for you. Right on. And then of course Garland comes in and bye, or, but I mean, that would have happened anyway. We know that.
Of course.
2018 was a different kettle of squid altogether. You talk about running through walls. You talk about don't let them off the ropes. I mean, these are really smart things, but yet do that, all of it within the bounds of the law, clearly, obviously, without be a happy warrior. Be glad you're there. Remember the main thing are the kids. The main thing is the kids, and we shouldn't lose sight of what our outcome is. But how do you decide what the outcome is? It certainly wasn't something that you decided at the outset that, hey, we're going to get rid of the superintendent. No, you just wanted to hold his feet to the fire, right? And so how do you goal set?
Yeah, I think that the outcomes shift as we progress and as the timeline moves forward. And at first our our mission was, well, we want to remove the 6 school board members that were part of that Facebook group that, didn't remove themselves, that didn't apologize, that didn't denounce it. And that, that's how we really mobilized. But, we knew that was going to be a tough task. It's a very difficult process in Virginia, which requires your local prosecutor to actually be on your side, which we didn't have. We had success in one of them. But by the time we had that success, that was earth-shattering, and it was, a vindication. But then the game changes a little bit, because now you're not dealing with a private Facebook group anymore. Now you're dealing with a cover-up of a sexual assault to pass a transgender bathroom policy. And so, at that moment, I thought, look, we gotta double down on this, but really the focus needs to be on changing power in the Capitol, in Richmond, because if we don't, this is all going to get swept under the rug. So for about a month, I think we were very focused on making sure that Youngkin won. And then after that, it shifted again. And, we had 2 other removals that we tried. We weren't successful. The system sort of surrounded us, and we weren't able to succeed. But, it wasn't as important anymore, because we knew that there was an actual investigation going on. So we did everything we could to get as much information out publicly, in the public forum while that investigation was going on, specifically highlighting the fact that they wouldn't give us the independent report that they had done and said or implied would be released. We took them to court on that. We weren't successful there, but now the Attorney General is doing it, and we think that they were going to be successful. We put out lots of different information that we had in hundreds and thousands of pages of FOIAs that showed that the school system wasn't reporting the sexual assaults as they told the public. And our goal was to really put as much out there and ultimately hope for the best. And then what happened in, December of 2022, we get a special grand jury report that really confirmed, I'd say, just about everything that we were saying for the past 2 years, which is that you had a school system and a school board that was more focused on covering their collective butts than school safety or, academics. And then the superintendent got indicted. So the end game always sort of shifts. Ultimately, the end game needs to be expose it and let the people know what is going on. And your hope is that they're paying attention enough that you're going to make change.
When you FOIA'd, did they give you electronic records, or did they pull the old Hillary Clinton thing and give you copies of electronic records so you have to physically go through them and vet them?
Well, they didn't even give me the independent report. They just said, attorney-client privilege, which I thought was ironic, because I can't say, like, on one hand, it's independent, right? And then on the other hand, it's attorney-client privilege. Like, well, you got to pick one. Either it's attorney-client privilege and you kind of lie to everybody, or it's independent and you got to give it to us. But when they do FOIA, it's usually electronic. I've had times where they actually give me the documents, like boxes of documents, which are, gold mines of information. But, like anything, they adapt, right? And now they exclude things. They overuse attorney-client privilege. They overuse for, student privacy. Yep. Or, if there's student a lot privacy. Of material, I'll charge you like $37,000 for, a tranche of documents, which is obviously a disincentive to send Freedom of Information Act requests.
Yeah. I saw that, I saw you on Tucker Carlson recently, not too awfully long ago, late March, talking about your book, which is Parents of the World Unite, How to Save Our Schools from the Left's Agenda. Well, what do you think of Tucker being ousted from Fox News? What's the result?
Well, I saw his post last night, and, I think Tucker has really built enough of a name where you can get 47 million views on a tweet video. I like Tucker. I always enjoyed going on his show. I felt like a good rapport with him. And I think he brings attention to a lot of things that, other shows or other reporters may not go. So I think everybody is looking to see what's next, because whatever it is, it's going to be very big.
Hey, you know what? You'll be able to go on his program, whatever it ends up being, or what platform he decides to go with. And it's really up to him, his decision. And I enjoy watching you over there too. And I thank you very much, Ian Pryor, for coming on the Adult in the Room podcast. I know you've given a lot of your time, and I really appreciate it. We don't take it for granted. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Adult in the Room podcast. To keep the programs you like to listen to, please rate this podcast with a fantastic 5 stars on your Apple Podcast app every time you listen. And give me a great review. Plus, of course, subscribe to the podcast. It makes a difference with the big tech algorithm and the big tech oligarchs, and it makes us easier to find. Please get in touch with me on all the big tech stuff. Yeah, we're still there. Using the names Victoria Taft or the Adult in the Room podcast on MeWe, Parler, Minds, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Thanks to 1ACast for imaging, editing, and production. The fantastic song is Gospel by the March 4th Band of Portland, Oregon. Music for Antifa versus Mike Strickland is Ride or Die by Raps by RC. The Adult in the Room podcast is also a production of Flamingo Road Studios. Remember, head up, heart out, and strive to be the adult in the room. Till next time, mischief managed.